Anthony Million. Written and illustrated by Edwin Gilven. Read for you by Sharon Lacey. Forward. Come ride the wave of cats and dogs as they rained upon the earth for destruction in their hearts, only to meet young Anthony Million, Earth's newest hero. Acknowledgement. To the many and the one who care to care and stand for being that helping hand. Hope and enthusiasm does what it's supposed to do. They give hope. I acknowledge all the Anthony Millions in this world. Stay magical within. Awesome. You wear it well. Edwin. Anthony Million. As young Anthony Million looked out of his kitchen window, he suddenly screamed, "Mom, come quick! It's raining cats and dogs sitting on water horses! Mom, come quick!" His mother smiled softly as she approached her young son. She teasingly rubbed his head. "Oh, Anthony, that's just an old saying people say when it's raining very hard. And it's cats and dogs, not water horses." She chuckled as she slightly pushed one of the kitchen curtains aside to look outside herself. "I see no water horses, Anthony. See?" She allowed him to look outside of her window. "It's just raining very hard, dear." She released the curtain and smiled at him as she vanished into the living room. Anthony watched her. Then he quickly turned back to the window. His eyes widened. He yelled, "Mom, they're back! They're back!" And true enough, the cats and dogs sitting on water horses were falling to the ground with great speed, and upon hitting the ground, they would splash, then run off in different directions with tremendous speed. It was an incredible sight to see. Young Anthony just watched as he finished eating his lunch, which consisted of peanut butter and jelly sandwich with milk. "Mom, I'm finished. Can I go outside and play?" A short time later, young Anthony Million stood outside in the pouring rain with his rain gear on, cap, boots, and raincoat, all yellow. He carried a wooden sword in hand as he twirled it around, striking down invisible foes as he splashed about in every mud-water hole he could possibly find. But, unaware to him, just several feet away, just beyond his eyesight, 2 frogs were having a conversation. They were brothers.
"Varese, I tell you, they are gathering by the edge of the forest. What can we do? If it doesn't stop raining those cats and dogs on those water horses, our town is doomed."
Suddenly, young Anthony Million sprang forward. He shouted excitedly, "You can see them too? I told Mom it was raining cats and dogs sitting on water horses. Why are they coming here?" Young Anthony looked at the frogs with a bright gleam of enthusiasm. The 2 frogs quietly stared at one another. Gales, the shorter of the 2, spoke.
"It's true, kid. They come from some kind of rain planet in space and found Earth by accident. They're here to take over our planet."
"Take over our planet?" yelled young Anthony. He looked at the frogs for answers.
"This is amazing,"
Varese calmly replied, the taller of the 2 frogs. He continued,
"Yup, this is pretty amazing that you can hear and understand us. What's your name, kid?"
"My name is Anthony Million of Mountain Bay Street, and he held up his wooden sword and waved it about. "And I will help defend our town. Just tell me what you need me to do." He briskly struck through the falling rain with his sword.
"Whoa, you're pretty good with that thing. My name is Gales, and this is my brother, Varese. We're the guardians of the many plants throughout our forest and town." "And," interrupted Varese, "those creatures are here to destroy the balance of our flower system."
"Why?" yelled young Anthony.
"Hope, kid. They know this planet relies on flowers. Flowers provide hope, bring joy to many. You'd be amazed what goodness one flower can bring."
"My mom loves flowers."
"Most of us do, kid. But you see, Our town is their dropping zone."
Varese turned toward Gales. Gales spoke.
"We have only today to defeat them. We can probably gather enough forest animals to stop them before it stops raining."
Young Anthony Million, with his bright yellow armor of rain clothes, stood even taller as he thrust his wooden sword into the sky. He proclaimed, "I, Anthony Million, will stop them. They have no right coming here to trying to take my mother's flowers." He again thrust his wooden sword into the falling rain. Both Varese and Gales looked at the young 4-year-old and nodded. This young kid just might be able to help them. He just might.
"Kid, can you meet us in about 10 minutes at the edge of your lawn? They're using your front yard and others to land because of your sprinkler system. They believe they can contaminate it with their water to poison all the surrounding flowers."
Young Anthony said nothing. He slowly turned and saw more cats and dogs, still riding on water horses, fall on his lawn, only to scamper off toward the woods. He yelled as he pointed his wooden swords at them. They rained harder to earth. Gales watched too. He spoke.
"Meet us in 10 minutes. We'll see you soon."
Suddenly Gales stopped and looked back at Anthony.
"I still don't know how he can hear us talking." "Let alone us hearing him,"
interrupted Varese. He too looked back at young Anthony as he ran toward his front yard with water splashing everywhere possible. 10 minutes in the middle of a huge field at the edge of Anthony's property is where he met the 2 frogs and so many more forest animals, and all of them dressed to defend our planet. One of the animals spoke. "So this is the child you were talking about. I hope he's good." Then he turned and saw the cats and dogs at the edge of the forest. There were hundreds of them, and all sitting tall on their water horses. Some had water lancers, others had water swords. There was a loud sounding of some kind of horn, and the cats and dogs screamed as they charged toward Anthony's house. The invasion was on. Young Anthony Million sluggishly ran toward the cats and dogs. The rain continued to fall mercilessly hard. The struggle for survival of Earth's flowers was now in the hands of so few. Nevertheless, they fought on. As young Anthony ran as fast as he could, he discovered that surprisingly the water on the ground beneath him steadily rose rapidly and swooshed up into the shape of a horse without breaking stride as they ran. He had his very own water horse. He giggled aloud with enthusiasm. "Yeah! Ha ha! Ha ha!" He pointed his wooden sword forward and splashed onward. Then the inevitable happened. Animals and child collided with the invaders. Water splashed and fell everywhere as the 2 armies clashed in the middle of the wet field. Young Anthony struck down hard at the cats and dogs that tried to pull him from his water horse. He slashed to the left, then he slashed to the right. With each blow he delivered, he exploded them into water, their true form. Oh, how magnificently he fought! Slashing there, slashing here, a true warrior fighting the good fight. Now, as this ferocious combating continued on, Anthony's father looked out of his front room window. He spoke calmly as he sipped on his tea. He said, "Dear, look at this. Anthony is pretending to be fighting bad guys with that wooden sword I made for him." He took another sip of his tea and smiled. Anthony's mother walked over to the window, pulled the curtain back slightly. She smiled. This morning he was yelling it was raining cats and dogs sitting on water horses. "Huh," replied her husband. He continued, "Water horses. Wow, what an imagination, huh?" Both husband and wife stared as Anthony valiantly fought the seemingly invisible foes in the pouring rain. They smiled at one another and slowly released the curtains as they walked back into their living room, not realizing that in truth, young Anthony was actually engaged in real combat. Suddenly, someone screamed to young Anthony, "We're winning! We're winning!" Then, surprisingly, out of nowhere, a blast of warm water spewed down and knocked many of the forest animals off their feet and sent them sliding backward on the wet grass. Young Anthony pulled hard on the reins of his water horse and brought the water horse to his hind legs as it twirled around. Anthony gasped in astonishment. It was a gigantic water dragon. The dragon inhaled as he looked down at young Anthony. Then he spewed gallons upon gallons of water onto Anthony and his water horse. The great force from the warm water knocked young Anthony off of his water horse and disintegrated his horse back into the wet grass. By then our Anthony was on his feet and crouched his wooden sword at his side. The water dragon stood over 7 feet tall. Nevertheless, our courageous Anthony Million ran toward the water dragon, holding his wooden sword, and once again the water on the ground swooshed up to form another water horse underneath him. As he galloped toward the water beast, he raised his wooden sword over his head with both his hands. He screamed as loud as his little voice would allow. "Aye!" He slashed down with all of his strength. He heard a sloshing sound. Next, kerplash! He had split the dragon in half. Splash! The water splashed downward very hard and even knocked Anthony backward some 20 feet as it once again disintegrated his water horse back into the wet grass. As Anthony slid backward, the hard rain suddenly stopped and it began to sprinkle a light mist of rain. Young Anthony now on his back. He was motionless. The forest animals, panicked and concerned for their human warrior, rushed to his side as he lay on his back, clenching his sword. They yelled, "Are you all right? Kid, you all right?" Next, they heard a giggle. It was young Anthony. He drummed his hands and feet against the wet grass as he cheerfully yelled, "Ha ha! We won! We won! Ha 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 ha!" He continued to drum his feet in joy. Gales and his brother Varese began to cheer along with the other forest animals. Yes, Earth was once again safe. They helped their champion to his feet. They thanked him as they patted him on his back and shoulders. Young Anthony straightened his yellow rain cap as he smiled, and then he heard, "Anthony, it's time for you to come in." It was his mother. She continued, "Time for dinner." Then she closed the front door. Young Anthony spoke. Thanks, guys. My mother's and Earth's flowers are now safe." He began to walk away when he stopped and turned around to face the group of animals. He looked at them with a prideful and defiant smile. "If you ever need me again," he forcefully stabbed his wooden sword into the wet ground. The sword wobbled from side to side before it stopped. He spoke. "You'll know where to find me." Then he turned and ran toward his house, leaving the sword embedded into the ground. Minutes later he entered his house and changed out of his wet clothes. He walked into the dining room and over to the table where his mother asked, "Did you have a good time outside? You look so tired, Anthony." She passed him his dinner plate with food on it. "Thanks." He paused before taking a bite from his food. "Mom, saving the earth is hard work." He picked up his fork. "But I did it." With that and a mouth filled with food, he smiled at himself with pride. Young Anthony Million. This particular story will be filed under E for enthusiasm. The enthusiasm and love that a child would fight with so much passion and enthusiasm to preserve hope for all mankind. Hope comes in so many ways and fashions, and especially on rainy days. May the next flower you see tickle your heart in a beautiful way. The end. We hope you've enjoyed Anthony Millian, written for you by Edwin Gilven, narrated by Sharon Lacey. All rights reserved.